Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gaur Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Padajana Ranjana Padajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Padajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Parvajikacharya Ashtoto Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Parvajikacharya Ashtoto Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Unio. Looks like you ran out of masks. You need a mask? Do we have masks? We'll give you a mask. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I think we're on text 13. 313. What do you say, Prakash? Look right? Okay. Okay, page 151. On this third day of November 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 3 entitled Karma Yoga, text number 13 on page 151. Yagnishishtashinaksanto Muchyante sarvakil bishai Bundate te tvagam papa Ye pachantyatmakaranat Yagyashishtashinaksanto Muchyante sarvakil bishai Bundate te tvagam papa Ye pachantyatmakaranat. 151. Yagyashishtashinaksanto Muchyante sarvakil bishai Bundate te tvagam papa Ye pachantyatmakaranat. Yagyashishtashinaksanto Muchyante sarvakil bishai Bunjate te. Bunjate te tvagam papa. Ye pachantyatma karanat. Go ahead, Ron. Yagyashishtashinak santo. Bunjate te kilbishai. Bunjate te tvagam papa. Ye pachantyatma karanat. Prakash. Yagyashishtashinak santo. Bunjate te kilbishai. Bunjate te tvagam papa. Ye pachantyatma karanat. Yunia, you want to try? Yagyashishtashinak santo. Muchyante sarva kilbishai. Bunjate te tvagam papa. Ye pachantyatma karanat. Head. Yagyashishtashinak santo. Muchyante sarva kilbishai. Bunjate te tvagam papa. Ye pachantyatma karanat. Yagyashishta, of food taken after performance of yagya. Ashina, eaters. Santaha, the devotees. Muchyante, get relief. Sarva, all kinds of. Kilbishai, from sins. Bunjate, enjoy. Te, they too, but. Agham, grievous sins. Papa, sinners. Ye, who. Pachanti, prepare food. Atmakaranat, for sense enjoyment. Translation. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. Purport. The devotees of the Supreme Lord, or the persons who are in Krishna consciousness, are called santas, and they are always in love with the Lord as it is described in the Brahma Samhita 538. Premanjana chudita bhakti vilochanena santak sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti. The santas, being always in the compact of love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, the giver of all pleasures, or Mukunda, the giver of liberation, or Krishna, the all-attractive person, cannot accept anything without first offering it to the Supreme Person. Therefore, such devotees always perform yagyas in different modes of devotional service, such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Archanam, etc. And these performances of yagyas keep them always aloof from all kinds of contamination of sinful association in the material world. Others who prepare food for self or sense gratification are not only thieves, but also the eaters of all kinds of sins. How can a person be happy if he is both a thief and sinful? It is not possible. Therefore, in order for people to become happy in all respects, they must be taught to perform the easy process of Sankirtan Yagya in full Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, there can be no peace or happiness in the world. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this is in the context of Krishna actually speaking about performing sacrifice for the devas, and the devas providing necessities of life. And if you don't do that, then you're a thief. Punkte stena evasa. The word stena means thief. That was in the previous verse. But this verse is all about prasadam. I mean, this is what prasadam is about, right? Cooking for the sake of the Lord, making a sacrifice out of it, and taking the remnants. This word shishta means remnants, yagya shishta, the remnants of sacrifice. And it's purifying. It purifies you of sinful reactions. But on the other hand, those who simply cook for themselves, they eat only sin. In other words, they're entangling themselves by the simple act of just cooking and eating. What to speak of buying snacks in the store somewhere and not even cooking and just eating for Sanskrit. So this is a very important point in this verse, along with the verse in the 9th chapter, 26, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam, are two of the underlying verses in the Bhagavad Gita that support the eating of prasadam, and that we do so that's such an integral part of the process of bhakti yoga. So Prabhupada in his purport, he talks about the santas. I can't resist telling you experience we used to have. When I was in New York, you've heard of that big temple on 55th Street? This is the only temple ISKCON actually had in Manhattan, except, of course, 26 2nd Avenue. But that was a fabulous building. Prabhupada was very ecstatic to get that building, and visited there several times. And I had the good fortune of actually living there from the end of 79 through 1980, when they sold the building at the end. They couldn't afford to support it. It was $13,000 a month just to heat it. Yeah, and that was a lot of money at those days to raise. Anyway, but I went out several times, and we used to do this for 2 Christmas marathons as Santa Claus. We were dressed as Santa Claus, and when the cops or police or authorities wanted to know about it, we pointed to this. He said, "Look, we're Santas. You see this? It says right there. We're called Santas." This is one of the ways in which we... But we were giving out, magazines and things and collecting Lakshmi. But it's interesting how this word, here we are sitting in SanDiego, right? Santa Fe, Santa Clara. It's the same word is there in English and Sanskrit. Of course, that's not, I guess that's a Spanish word, or Latin anyway. So there's definite, you can find many words like that. Like tumulo means tumultuous. And the word nama, Hare Nama, like name, So there's a definite relationship. Sanskrit is known to be the root of all languages. So now Prabhupada talks here about being in a compact of love. Yep, page 151. So he always brings it back to the bhakti, because this is, the context is they're talking about worshipping the devas, but we're worshipping Krishna. And he quotes this wonderful verse from the Brahma Samhita. Some of you may know it. Premanjanaturita bhakti velochanena santa, again, santa sadaiva hridayeshu velokayanti. That those who are have coated their eyes with the salve of love of God, prema, they can see within their hearts at all times the beautiful form of Shyamasundar. Shyamasundara machinduguna swarupam. I worship Govinda, the prime of the Lord. So that's how the senses are purified by the process of bhakti. And that includes all the senses, the vision, the hearing, the tongue, the eating, everything. Because everything can be engaged in Krishna consciousness, and even if you just hear, what did Parikka do? He heard, the Bhagavatam, and all the senses become purified just from that act of hearing. So this is what yajna does. Yajna is part of the purifying process. In the 18th chapter, Krishna will describe to Arjuna that, because he wanted to know what's the process of sannyas, which seems to mean to give everything up. But he says what you don't give up are these 3, yajna, dana, and tapa. Sacrifice, charity, and austerity. Because they purify even the great souls. So when you think about it, all of those require a sacrifice. Sacrifice itself, and of course dana, you're giving some of your wealth. What to speak of tapasya, where you're going against the grain. The conditioned soul is trying to make a comfortable situation in this world. The last thing you want to do is tapasya. Just like, you work hard, all week, and it's tapasya, and putting up with the boss and doing everything else. And then in the weekend, finally, I can get free from that. You don't like the tapasya, but you have to do it. But tapasya means voluntary. Voluntary austerities for a higher aim. Now, oftentimes tapasyas can also be engaged in for nefarious purposes. Who comes to mind? Hiranyakashipu. standing on tiptoe with his hands up for thousands of years, all to become the master of the universe, right? So this is demonic tapasya. Tapasya gives you power. Just like anyone wants to become an athlete, there's so much tapasya. Like the poor gymnastic kids, for the Olympics. Tremendous. It's like torture what they go through. All for the gold medal, whatever. So tapasya is a power, force, and there's also materialistic charity in different modes of nature. All these things can be done in different modes of nature. But when they're done for Krishna, they're transcendental and they purify the soul. And they all should be done according to the prescription of the Shastra and the Guru. In other words, who do you give charity to? What kind of austerities do you perform? What are feasible austerities so you don't burn out? And what are necessary austerities so you don't just try to tiptoe through the tulips, and think that... No, the austerity is necessary, but it has to be done in such a way that it's actually producing the final result, which is purification and not burnout and whatever. So here, this of course is emphasizing yajna, because the classic thing in karma yoga is that you perform a yajna. You work hard, you make some result, and then you give a portion of it over of your hard-earned wealth, or in kind. You can give sacrifice in kind. So that's what's being talked about here. And those who take the remnants of that sacrifice, especially in this is talking about food, you get purified of your sinful reactions. So even without understanding how that's working. Okay, and as often happens when he talks about yajna, Prabhupada talks about the Sankirtan yajna, which is coupled with prasadam. You read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the big kirtan goes on for hours, and then everybody takes prasadam. And sometimes then they'll start chanting and dancing again. So those two go together, and both purifying. All right, so now the next two verses describe how even if you just want to eat, you have to perform sacrifice. There's no getting around it. Otherwise, you'll starve. Annad bhavanti bhutani parjanyad anna sambhavaha yajnyan bhavati parjanyo yajna karma samudbhavaha. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yajna, or sacrifice, and yajna is born of prescribed duties. Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan, now, if you recall, Prabhupada dedicated the book to Baladev Vijayabhushan because that was the primary commentary that he used, and now he's quoting him directly. Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan, a great commentator on the Bhagavad Gita, writes as follows: Ye Indra Jangata Avisvastitam Yagyam Sarveshwaram Vishnum Abhyacha Tache Shamashnanti Tena Taddeha Yatram Sampariyanti Te Santaha Sarveshwarasya Yajna Purushasya Bhakta Sarva Kilbishar Anadi Kala Vivadhar Atmanubhava Pratibandakar Nikila Papa Vimuchante. A lot of familiar words in there. The Supreme Lord, who is known as the Yajna Purush, or the personal beneficiary of all sacrifices, is the master of all the demigods, who serve him as the different limbs of the body serve the whole. Demigods like Indra, Chandra, and Varuna are appointed officers who manage material affairs. And the Vedas direct sacrifices to satisfy these demigods so that they may be pleased to supply air, light, water, and water sufficiently to produce food grains. When Lord Krishna is worshipped, the demigods, who are different limbs of the Lord, are also automatically worshipped. Therefore, there is no separate need to worship the demigods. For this reason, the devotees of the Lord, who are in Krishna consciousness, offer food to Krishna and then eat, a process which nourishes the body spiritually. By such action, not only are the past sinful reactions in the body vanquished, but the body becomes immunized to all contamination of material nature. When there is an epidemic disease, an antiseptic vaccine protects a person from the attack of such an epidemic. Similarly, food offered to Lord Vishnu and then taken by us makes us sufficiently resistant to material affection. Now, whenever I see the word sufficiently, I don't know if I told you about this already. You have to Does it mean what we usually think? I also wanted this morning, I wanted to sometimes it does. Sometimes sufficiently means enough. But in Prabhupada's vocabulary, it can also mean abundantly, lavishly, which is not usually the way it's used in modern American English. And before I forget, I'm going to put my finger here so I forget where I am. Immunized. Okay. Where was I? Okay. This morning, we were talking about envy, right? That was part of the purport and everything. How we have to try to get free of envy. Now, you have to watch out. When you read Prabhupada's books, the word envy can also mean malice, which it doesn't usually mean in modern American English. I looked it up on my little iPad while the class was going on. I had to leave because I have to leave at 8:35. And there it said the usual envy, which is to be jealous of someone else's property or something like that. And then it said malice, obsolete. Now, it may be it's obsolete in America, but it's probably still current in England. Prabhupada learned English from the Scottish, in Scottish Churches College and before, and the English were occupying. So he uses that word envy sometimes to mean bear malice toward. Just like say, one should not be envious even of an ant. What has the ant got that I want? It obviously doesn't mean jealous, right? It means one should be kind to all living beings. So one has to watch when you're reading, does this envy mean that somebody is envious of something, or does it actually mean malice? Now it's interesting, it can be both. Like, why do we come here? Well, we're envious of Krishna, right? And that fits perfectly that, well, he's got everything, and we want to also enjoy. We want to be enjoyers. But at the same time, there's a verse at near the end of the 7th chapter that Prabhupada would often quote as explaining how we felt in the material world. Itcha dvesha samutena dvandamohena bharata savabhutani samohang sarge yanti parantapa. That last line means enter into the creation, So itcha and dvesha. So itcha means desire, and dvesha means envy. It means abhorrence, like that. So we want to enjoy separately, and we are against serving Krishna, or against Krishna. So there's that envy there has two aspects. One is we're envious of what he has, and we feel angry at him for having everything, whatever. We're in illusion. And so those two things, Itcha Dvesha Samutena Dvamramo, arises the illusion of duality. That this will make me happy, this will make me sad. The material world is full of good and bad things, and I'm going to try to maximize the good. And you get absorbed in material energy. And every living entity who's here has been overwhelmed by this duality that has arisen from desire and hate. That's the way it's defined, desire and hate. So be careful of it. Now, when it comes to sufficiently, makes it sufficiently resistant to material affection. And here I think Prabhupada is saying completely. This is what it can mean. Similarly, food offered to Lord Vishnu and then taken by us makes us totally resistant to material affection. Now here's another word that he uses differently. Affection, what does affection mean? I mean, let's face it normally means you have affection for your little child, and it's that kind of, that's not what it means here. It means being affected by, which is in the modern American English dictionary, but it's rarely used that way. There was some affection, by the cold weather, on him, and therefore he got a cold. He was affected by it. He had some, So that's that's another unusual usage here. You have to be prepared for that when you read Prabhupada books. Similarly, food offered to Lord Vishnu and then taken by us makes us sufficiently resistant to material affection, being affected by matter. And one who is accustomed to this practice is called a devotee of the Lord. Therefore, a person in Krishna consciousness who eats only food offered to Krishna can counteract all reactions of past material infections, which are impediments to the progress of self-realization. On the other hand, one who does not do so continues to increase the volume of sinful action, and this prepares the next body to resemble hogs and dogs, to suffer the resultant reactions of all sins. The material world is full of contaminations, and one who is immunized by accepting prasadam of the food of the Lord, food offered to Vishnu, is saved from the attack, whereas one who does not do so becomes subjected to contamination. Food, grains, or vegetables are factually eatables. The human being eats different kinds of food, grains, vegetables, fruits, etc., and the animals eat the refuse of the food, grains, and vegetables, grass, plants, etc. Human beings who are accustomed to eating meat and flesh must also depend on the production of vegetation in order to eat the animals. Therefore, ultimately, we have to depend on the production of the field and not on the production of big factories. The field production is due to sufficient rain. Here we are again. This could mean sufficient as normally. To sufficient rain from the sky, and such rains are controlled by demigods like Indra, the sun, the moon, etc., and they are all servants of the Lord. The Lord can be satisfied by sacrifices. Therefore, one who cannot perform them will find himself in scarcity. That is the law of nature. Yajna, specifically the Sankirtan yajna prescribed for this age, must therefore be performed to save us, at least from the scarcity of food supply. And there's a famous instance where there had been a drought in Hyderabad, I think it was. And Prabhupada came there, did the program, sent the devotees out on Harinam, and the rains came. You can see what a wonderful preaching event that was. So it's actually a fact. And we can see in so graphically today. I mean, the devotees can understand all of this disturbance in the climate. I mean, it's we call it climate change. It's climate catastrophe. Extreme storms. I mean, hurricanes. I used to live in Miami in the 80s, and if we had 3 hurricanes a season, it was a lot. Like we're up to 20 hurricanes or something. And poor New Orleans, they keep getting blasted, but there's like 3 hurricanes hit this season. I saw, they come up in the Gulf there. Well, and they say, oh yeah, because the oceans are warmer, and they're warmer because of the fossil fuels, the greenhouse gases that are being sent up, But ultimately, it's because, greed and the demons are in charge. They're running, just like we read in the Bhagavatam, sometimes they get in charge. And their only criterion is what increases the wealth, what increases the power. This is what they believe in. And the hell with in the future generations or, anybody else's health like that. And it's just happening, all over the world. And so you can see, where are the birds? I've been here 31 years. And I remember when I first came, I came in the end of July, I think it was, in '89. And then as we got into the fall, the birds were migrating from the north to the south, because it's going to be winter up there. And they would stop here in SanDiego because it was a big lake. I think there's a lake east of here, and they would be able to drink and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, there were all these birds outside my window singing, into the morning, just tons of birds. Where are the birds? We used to have to cover the prasadam. You remember out there, because the birds would all come? You notice they haven't been coming, as far as I can see. There's hardly a bird. I read about it. Billions and billions of birds have died off because of the distortions in the climate, and there's not enough food, and there's not enough insects. That's another thing. Insect apocalypse, I call it. We think we don't need them. It's a relief, But what about the bees? We need the bees, right? So this is all part of they're not performing sacrifice, they don't recognize the authority of God, what to speak of the gods, and quickly the planet is becoming unlivable, So therefore it's an emergency, and Krishna consciousness has to be spread. Living simply in harmony with nature, not killing the cows, that in itself is such a sinful activity. We're feeling it now, and it's going to be worse. So it's practical. These 2 verses, the next one, they go together, 14 and 15, are, they're just practical about how to live in this world with peace and prosperity. Karma brahmodbhavam vidhi brahmakshara samudbhavam tasmat sarvakatam brahma nityam yagye pratishtitam Regulated activities, so notice I'll read the previous verse, you'll see how they go together. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yajna or sacrifice, and yajna is born of prescribed duties. Regulated activities or prescribed duties are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. In other words, there's a whole interdependent chain here. Purport. Yagyartha karma, or the necessity of work for the satisfaction of Krishna only, is more expressly stated in this verse. If we have to work for the satisfaction of Yajna Purush, Vishnu, then we must find out the direction of work in Brahman. Now this is a mistake. This has been fixed. It's not Brahman, it's Brahma. Brahma also means the Vedas, you see? And that's what it's used here, Brahma, you see? It says transcendence. But you know the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam? Janmadyasya yatam vayad tadatashtarte shribhigya swarat tene brahma vedadya adikavaye muryanti yatsuraya. So the second line begins with tene, Brahma. Tene means that, I think by him, by the Supreme Person. Brahma, that Brahma there is the Vedas. Adikavaye is Brahma, the original wise person. In the heart of Brahma is infused Brahma, which is the Vedas. And that's what's being spoken of here. So all by way of saying it's not in Brahman, but a small b, italicized Brahma. Vishnu then we must find out the direction of work in Brahma, or the transcendental Vedas. The Vedas are therefore codes of working directions. Anything performed without the direction of the Vedas is called vikarma, or unauthorized or sinful work. Therefore, one should always take direction from the Vedas to be saved from the reaction of work. As one has to work in ordinary life by the direction of the state, one similarly has to work under the direction of the supreme state of the Lord. Such directions in the Vedas are directly manifested from the breathing of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is said, Asya mahato bhutasya nishvasitam, that's breathing. Etadyad rigvedo yajurvedaha samavedaha atarvangi rasaha. Quote, the four Vedas, namely the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda, are all emanations from the breathing of the great personality of Godhead. This is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 4.5.11. The Lord, being omnipotent, can speak by breathing air, for it is confirmed, as it is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, the Lord has the omnipotence to perform through each of his senses the actions of all other senses. In other words, the Lord can speak through his breathing, and he can impregnate by his eyes. In fact, it is said that he glanced over material nature and thus fathered all living entities. After creating or impregnating the conditioned souls into the womb of material nature, he gave his directions in the Vedic wisdom as to how such conditioned souls can return home back to Godhead. We should always remember that the conditioned souls in material nature are all eager for material enjoyment. But the Vedic directions are so made that one can satisfy one's perverted desires, then return to Godhead, having finished his so-called enjoyment. It is a chance for the conditioned souls to attain liberation. Therefore, the conditioned souls must try to follow the process of yajna by becoming Krishna conscious. Even those who have not followed the Vedic injunctions may adopt the principles of Krishna consciousness, and that will take the place of performance of Vedic yajnas or karmas. So, this reminds me, because we're talking about the breathing, how the impartation of the Vedas is essential for direction of the conditioned souls, so that they don't just sink down to animal life, and they can actually go back to Godhead. So this is a nice place for me to review the Dashamula. There's a paper being prepared. I think those who are here in Mangalartik, Maharaj mentioned it, that he's working on that with Bhakti Vigyan Swami. I'm doing a little work. And it's trying to codify the philosophy of Krishna consciousness in very concisely, so that everyone can learn it and have it. And this idea was there when Bhaktivinoda Thakur was writing, a great erudition, and he wrote something called the Dasha Mula. Dasha Mula are the 10 root points of philosophy that we live by as Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So the first one is very cogent and related to what we've just been reading. And he says, Amnaya. Amnaya is the first point. And Amnaya consists of the knowledge that's come down from Krishna through the disciplic succession, has been codified in the books, the Vedic books, and forms the foundation of the Brahmana. Brahmana is the source of evidence by which you formulate prameyas. The prameyas are the actual points of philosophy. But how can we know them? They're all beyond our ability to understand or figure out on our own. They're transcendental. They come down. So Krishna is always at the top, and he imparts that knowledge to Brahma. Brahma imparts it to Narada. Narada imparts it to Vyasa. Comes down from Madhvacharya in this particular disciplic succession. And there's other disciplic successions, coming through Shiva and coming through the Kumaras, coming through Lakshmi, like that. But the source is always Krishna. So I thought I'd review those 10 points of philosophy. The whole idea is that if you know these, you have a grasp of the entire philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and everything else is like, it's an outline, and everything else can be appended to that. In fact, I once saw Prabhupada had listed so many verses of the Bhagavad Gita, and after each one he was giving which point of the 10 it was, or the Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana, which is another way of thinking about it. So I'll go through and I'll explain which ones are Sambandha Abhideya and Prayojana. So first is Amnayak Prahatatvam Hadmiha Padamang Sarva Shaktim Risabdim Tad Binangshangsta Jivan Prakatika Valithan Tad Vimuktangsta Bhavat Beda Beda Prakasham Sakalam Avihare Sadhanam Shuddha Bhaktim Sadyam Tadpitameve to Budishitajanan Gaurachanda Bhajaitam. That's the other one. That's a different ending. It's just the ending that's different. Yeah. I'm sorry, I know it the other way. Yeah, this you learned this a while back. So Amnaya, as I mentioned, that's the transcendental knowledge coming directly from Krishna and embodied in the Shastra and in the hearts of the pure devotees. So, what does they teach? The first point is, Krishna is God. Rupa Goswami wrote a whole book about that, proving that Krishna is God. It's called the Lagu Bhagavatamrita. We may be more familiar with the Brihad Bhagavatamrita by Sanatan, but the Lagu is important. And it is a lot of very significant statements in there, verses. So, practically speaking, Prabhupada, a large part of the movement of his writings was proving that Krishna is God. When he first started the movement, and he incorporated it, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, I think it was Hayagriva Prabhu who suggested, wouldn't it be a little bit easier to relate to if he said he's going to cite for God consciousness? Prabhupada said, no. The whole point is to prove that Krishna is God. That's the basic principle of our faith. So Hadamiha Padamam, Hari, Krishna is the supreme. Well, what about him? That's point number 2. Say, and the third point is that Sarva Shaktim. He has all kinds of energies, and the internal, the marginal, and the external energy, and they have their the external energy, earth, water, fire, ether, and all those. So there's plenty to learn about each one of these points. But he's not just a powerhouse, he's the supreme person. And so he's Rasabdim, he's an ocean of rasa. And that's really what bhakti is about, is by discovering our own rasa and acting in that rasa, we establish ourselves in a relationship which is full of nectar. Okay, so this is God. We have Krishna's God, he's full of all kinds of powers, material and spiritual, and he engages in unlimited pastimes, rasa, nectarian pastimes. What about us? Tadbin angshangs jivan. The jivas are his separated anksha. Part and parcels, we have the same qualities in minute degree, So tadbin angshangs jivan, and many are prakriti kabalitan, swallowed up by the material energy, prakriti. But not to despair. Tadvamuktang sabhavat. Some are liberated. Many are liberated, more actually, and the conditioned can become liberated. So jivas are part and parcel of that supreme Lord, and we here have been swallowed up. We've been in the thrall of Maya for a long time, but we can also become liberated. Now, all of these points are by way of what is called sambandha, which is understanding who is God, who we are, what is this world, and what are the different relationships. Now, sambandha also means bondage. The ultimate sambandha is finding out your personal relationship with Krishna and acting in it. That's another understanding of sambandha. But here's the basic sambandha of, the questions that make you a human being, So this is all sambandha. And then he has this wonderful point, which is unique, to Lord Chaitanya's philosophy. Beda beda prakasham sakalam abhihare. That beda. That everything in existence is simultaneously one with and different from the Lord. Sakalam abhihare. So all of those are sambandha, from 2 through 8. And so that's 7 points. And then the 8th point is abhideya, which is the practice of, and what is it? Pure devotional service. Not mixed, because there's plenty of mixed devotional service. We're not going with Krishna with any motive. Sadhanam shuddha bhakti. The sadhana is pure bhakti. And what's the goal? Sadhyam tad pritam. Love for that Hari, that Krishna, is the goal of everything. And this is the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. This is what Lord Chaitanya taught. I worship him, So this verse encompasses the whole philosophy. And there's many subpoints. He wrote a whole book called Jaiva Dharma, of which this is an outline. Jaiva Dharma is a philosophical novel that Bhaktivinoda is actually his masterpiece. So anyway, I thought since we're talking here, Krishna's talking here, about where the duties are mentioned in the Brahma, in the Vedas. And the Vedas come from Krishna. Therefore, if the whole chain begins with Krishna. If you're going to find out what to do, or what sacrifice to perform, then you have to know your place in the varnashram, in the society. And it's all being defined by the Vedas, which come from Krishna. If you want to eat, you gotta have the rain, and therefore you have to perform sacrifice. So that's according to your activity and your duty, which is defined in the Vedas, which come from Krishna. That's what he's saying. So it all boils down again to devotional service. Okay, if there are any comments or questions for any of this, let me know, and we can try to discuss it. All right. Yes, Prabhu? Go ahead, Ed. Give him the mic, because that'll help the people. Yeah, and maybe take off the mask for this. You'll be okay. It's on.
Yeah. Oh, it's on, yeah. So, I have this, I'll try to make this short. Prasadam, normally, I think it's cooking. You cook for Krishna.
Uh-huh.
I'm a lousy cook. I cook maybe once a day if I'm lucky. So I make sandwiches, I have yogurt and blackberries I get from, and I offer them.
Uh-huh.
But it's not cooking. It's just I buy from the store, I wash it, and I offer it.
That's okay.
Is that okay?
Patram pushpam palam toyam. Palam is part of it, fruit.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be cooked. It just has to be arranged and offered with, if that's actually what you... I eat mostly raw stuff, big salad, stuff like that.
That's okay.
And what I eat that's cooked is mostly the burritos, which are cooked here and offered here. That's my real position.
I'm always concerned because, and I still have to give up some bad habits of graham crackers and all that, but I'm working on it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You're on the safe side. All right, let's do 1 or 2 more. So this is kind of a cycle, obviously. You're performing sacrifices for the demigods. They're sending the rain. The food is coming up. You're preparing, offer it back to the demigod, our Krishna. Text 16. Evam bhavatitam chakram nanavartayati hiyaha agayurindriyaramo mogam partha sajivati. My dear Arjun, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice thus established by the Vedas certainly leads a life full of sin. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. That's a great line, Agayur indriyaramo mogam partha sajivati. Agayur means a life of sin, simply for indriyaramo, for the satisfaction of the indriyas. You can see that. And living in vain, moga means you're not getting anywhere. You're living uselessly. My dear Arjun, okay, we said that. Purport, the Mammonist philosophy of work very hard and enjoy sense gratification is condemned herein by the Lord. Therefore, for those who want to enjoy this material world, the above-mentioned cycle of performing yajnas is absolutely necessary. One who does not follow such regulations is living a very risky life, being condemned more and more. By nature's law, this human form of life is specifically meant for self-realization. in either of the three ways, namely karma yoga, jnana yoga, or bhakti yoga. There is no necessity of rigidly following the performances of the prescribed yajnas for the transcendentalists who are above vice and virtue. But those who are engaged in sense gratification require purification by the above-mentioned cycle of yajna performances. There are different kinds of activities. Those who are not Krishna conscious are certainly engaged in sensory consciousness. Therefore, they need to execute pious work. The yajna system is planned in such a way that sensory conscious persons may satisfy their desires without becoming entangled in the reaction of sense gratificatory work. The prosperity of the world depends not on our own efforts, but on the background arrangement of the Supreme Lord, directly carried out by the demigods. Therefore, the yajnas are directly aimed at the particular demigods mentioned in the Vedas. Indirectly, it is the practice of Krishna consciousness, because when one masters the performance of yajnas, one is sure to become Krishna conscious. But if by performing yajnas one does not become Krishna conscious, such principles are counted as only moral codes. One should not, therefore, limit his progress only to the point of moral codes, but should transcend them to attain Krishna consciousness. So, practically speaking, as Krishna will explain later in this 7th chapter and the 9th chapter, the worship of demigods can be a great diversion. It can be a great diversion. I mean, how many, people in India worship Ganesh, so the business will succeed. That's it. That's it, right? They heard that's a good idea, so that's not going to get you at it. It's not progressive. Understanding the whole context of the sacrifice and that it's meant to lead to Krishna consciousness, that may help. But practically speaking, for us in the West here, it doesn't make any sense to worship the demigods. And Krishna will discourage that. He says, Kamais taistai riddhigyana papadintenya devata. He's going to say right in the 7th chapter, those whose mind is, whose knowledge is stolen by material desires, worship other devas. That comes right after bahunam jamanamante jnanamamapata pajyate. That after many births of cultivating knowledge, one who really has knowledge will surrender unto Vasudeva, me, understanding that Vasudeva is everything. But on the other hand, those whose knowledge is stolen away by material desires worship the other gods. And, Krishna said, I'll make your faith strong. You want to worship this god, that god? Okay. Yo yam yam tanam bhakta shadayachita mitchati. Tasya tasachalam shadham tam. I'll give you that faith. And then you worship with great faith, and you'll get some result, which actually comes from me, but you're not recognizing that. And those material results are very temporary. Antavattu palam tesham. Tal opamedasam. Not very smart. And then the punchline is, David Devi jo yanti, manbhakta yanti mamapi. If you're always worshipping the devas, you'll go to the devas. But if those who worship me come to me. That's an echo of the 9th chapter verse, like that. So he's saying, don't worship demigods. And the 9th, he very explicitly says that. Even if you get to Indraloka, you have to come back down here, So. But the point is, compared to just animal life, where people aren't worshiping anything except mammon, which Prabhupada talks about here, work very hard to enjoy mammonist philosophy, it's practically a spiritual suicide. When I think of this, I always think of this verse from the 87th chapter, 10th canto. It's a beautiful, there's prayers of personified Vedas. There's so much knowledge in there. And it's worth looking into. Gopi Puranadana Prabhu wrote these beautiful purports there, gleaning from all the different commentators. So the verse goes like this. Yadanupatam, the prayers are offered to Mahavishnu, as far as I can tell. Yadanupatam kurlai midamatma surit priyavat chatatitaton loketuhi te priyatmanicha nabhavataho asadupasanayatma hano nabhadaramantyaho asadupasanayatma hano yadanushaya brahme rubaye kusharira brata. So he's saying, my dear Lord, the human form of life is very suited to worshipping you. And when one uses his senses and mind and the rest of his body in worshipping you, then that body becomes his best friend. And it's kind of paraphernalia for worship, so you take care of it nicely. And you, on your side, as a super soul, you're guiding and there's a nice relation. Everything is fine. But alas, those who don't take their pleasure in worshipping you and serving you, they worship matter or mammon. Asat upasanaya. Asat upasana, worshipping the temporary. And what's the result? Atmahano is practically spiritual suicide. And so what's their fate? They have to wander, so many, and taking bad bodies, dangerous, which cause great suffering. Alas, this is the worst. So this is the real choice we have. We're given this human body. After many, many, many births with other bodies, now we have the human body, and the rare instance where we're actually interested in Bhagavad Gita and this matter. Most people are just, two-legged animals. Dvipada pashu, they go. They are just absorbed in material sense gratification, gross and subtle. So we have this choice. Every morning we get up. In other words, we're making the choice moment by moment. Now, if we start making the right choices and doing the things in Krishna consciousness and they taking part in the process, then the chances are higher that we'll continue to make those choices. But it takes vigilance. It takes effort because we're so conditioned, so habituated to acting against our own best interests, really. So these books Prabhupada has given us, the society has given us, and especially the mantra has given us, all of these are great sources of spiritual strength if we take advantage of them. And so, we should make a real effort to do that. So, and Mogam Partasajivati, Krishna never minces words. There's no time. They're on the battlefield. If you're simply trying to satisfy the senses, you're living in sin, and you're wasting the human form of life. Mogam Partasajivati means you're wasting. And the chances are very high you'll lose the human form. And go down. So, this is, and for me, the whole chapter culminates in the last part where he talks about karma and how it covers your knowledge, because that's really what's going on. Living simply for the senses and thinking about sense gratification and being in that mode of passion completely covers your spiritual knowledge, which is inherent in the soul. And so practicing the purification, bhakti, then makes you more interested in the things that actually can help you get out of this world. And that's why Prabhupada set up these classes. Okay, so that's about it for tonight. We have one more class this week, and we'll continue to explore this. But I left a few moments for a few little poems. One, it just flows right in from the last part of the class. This is from Rishabdev. Teachings of Rishabdev are really important. Prabhupada gave many classes. When that book came out, or it was just in manuscript form, I think, basically, he was in India, and he was giving class on 551 about everywhere he went. You hear the tapes, it was 6, 7, 8, 10 classes on it. So I wrote a little verse that kind of encapsulates the meaning of that. Don't waste this precious human life, dear friend, by working hard for hoggish happiness. Through bhakti yoga, worldly life transcend and learn to taste divine love's endless bliss. So it's very interesting because heavy statements there, and he's talking about tapasya. The whole thing really is about through transcendental tapasya. Purify your existence and then become eligible to taste trans. So he's not saying don't enjoy. He's saying don't enjoy in such a way that you become degraded, and even lose this precious human form of life. But perform divya, tapo divyam, divine austerity, purify your existence, and then you become more and more qualified to taste Brahma Saukya. Like that. So one more. So what is that Brahma Saukya? Being very eager to see and relish the beauty of Krishna's face and his whole form, and seeing the deity. So there's a verse, so many verses like that. Smita ducha makadhanda sandhi bhaktaravindam. This is the Sanskrit. And it says, from the lotus of your face, dear Lord, trickles forth the luscious nectar of the beauty of your smile. Your exalted devotees, great swans, seek the fragrance of that lotus, which does ere their hearts beguile. Your beloved gopis' eyes, mad bees, taste the most exquisite pleasure in that lotus of your face. O my dear Mukunda Dev, I pray, may the lake of my poor heart be by that lotus ever graced. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so we'll begin with